but like, why do we get points when they up?
Because they think.
This week,
The Flying Roos win, but don't win.
USA, where are you? And Big House, where are you?
Brazil shouts, starboard! And many other probably bad words. Germany.
Welcome guys to another episode of Up and Foiling, your favorite sailing podcast. And today we're gonna talk about these amazing 2 days we had last weekend in Sydney. In a more intimate version of this podcast, Ricky, how are you doing? Did you bring the candle for this intimate version?
It's just you and I, Theo, today. And yes, let's dive into the highlights from the Sydney event.
Yes, I have to say Australia dominated at least the fleet race, but
yes.
but Ricky was already telling me that there was action even before the race. Ricky, what happened?
First of all, USA had an accident while they were coming out of the port, and then the boat literally tipped over. So it's while they tow the boat out, it's quite a critical moment. You can't relax not even a bit on board these boats, and they just tipped over. They damaged the wing, bits of carbon everywhere, and they couldn't get it fixed for the weekend, so they were out. So it's continuing the bad form. USA.
Already before even starting race 1, all these kilometers traveled with a boat and not even one fleet raced. It's incredible.
Yeah, they can't get a break, these guys. And another thing that happened was during practice racing. So in the 2 days before the event, they have some practice. And here there was almost a massive collision. The collision was big between Germany and Brazil. Brazil had the right of way. Germany maybe didn't see them. Maybe they thought they could cross in front. But yeah, when two boats come to each other and they're flying at over 60, 70 kilometers per hour, well, it can't be good if they come into contact. And that's exactly what happened. So they picked up some penalty points, right, Theo?
Yeah, you told me they got not only points for the event, but also points for the overall standing, which is kind of like a disaster, I would say.
They can be very harsh. And Germany got 8 season points for the incident, so it's really a lot, especially for a team that maybe like Germany doesn't collect as many points in an event. Every boat really has the priority for SailGPs to maintain the assets, right? And so they have to avoid contact at all costs, and they thought Brazil could have done a bit more to avoid contact, so they also ended up collecting 4 season points penalty.
But like, why do we get points when they up?
Because they think we could have gone below them and avoided collision altogether.
Well, if we had seen him, of course we would.
No, I know. And they'll tell.
Above that, They also got event points. So they started and they're already like minus 12 or minus 8 on the leaderboard. So a long way to catch up.
It was interesting, as you said, this right of way, which we have been talking about since America's Cup, basically. And for me, that I'm not like a very big expert of sailing, it was interesting this event. I noticed that SailGP implemented this augmented reality even more, and it had basically a little circle which was red or green based on the right of way of the boat, and that was kind of helpful, I have to say, to understand who had to move out of the way and who could just go on on his way. So that I really appreciated from the SailGP. But we can now look a little bit into the results of day 1. So we had Fleet 1, who was won by the Swiss team, followed by Spain and Australia, who got the first podium, which was actually the worst result of the day. Because in Fleet 2, we had Great Britain taking the win, followed by Australia. That was actually my favorite race. That race was very tight. It was a great battle until the last mark, with the penultimate mark and the one before, where the two boats had just a distance of 1 second. That was amazing, really. I wish all the races could be like that.
It was a bit like match racing, right? It was those two boats far ahead in front of all the fleet, and then everybody following behind. So it was very nice, also the tactical element in that.
And then we also had some close call in this Fleet 2 race between New Zealand, Canada and Spain. Maybe something we can say about New Zealand, it's that they really didn't manage to get any good result in this first day. And we were just wondering before why, and we noticed they really stayed in the middle of the group, and that's really a problem when you don't manage to get in the front.
Yeah, it used to be New Zealand's superpower to be able to maybe start in the group and then pass everybody, find some clear lanes, and really end up in good positions, maybe in the top three, right? But they didn't show that speed that we're used to seeing from them, and they couldn't get out of hard, complicated situations. And we've seen that a lot with so many boats, with 11 boats. Rounding the buoys, what decisions you take, it's so critical because you may end up stuck behind a boat that's fallen off the foils, and then they occupy so much space and you can't get past them. So it's really critical, yeah. And New Zealand, they were lacking their superpowers. All their fan base will be scratching their heads, wondering what's going on with New Zealand.
Yeah, I think there's a good bunch of teams that are performing right at the front. There's a few that are obviously struggling to get there consistently as well, but I mean, for us, it's just about continuing to build. Leo's doing an absolutely amazing job, but just kind of continue to build that consistency and that relationship between us. So it was something really nice to put on a couple.
In Sydney was not so far from Auckland, but at least it was not a home match. And in the third fleet, indeed, they were also involved in a bit of a mess that happened in the very last mark together with Germany, and I think Spain as well. And they went all of the foils, and then Denmark could just pass through and take the fourth position. It was also very crazy.
With that, when you judge the ley line and you get to the bottom mark, it's so important because you have to judge it very well. You have to go around the mark fast so you don't slow down, because if you don't make the mark, you find yourself in a weird position. You can't make two maneuvers because it would be jiving twice. It makes you lose a lot of time, these two maneuvers. And if you try to sink in and go slower around the mark, you're going to have everybody passing you on the outside. And that's really what happened in that case in fleet race number 3.
So fleet race number 3 was won by Australia, as well as fleet race number 4. And I just want to ask you, I noticed that in all the 4 fleet races, Australia was really, really on spot at the start. So I thought that the Australia driver, Slingsby, we could say that he is the man that whispered to the starting line, or
Yeah, it was. They asked him at the end of the day, like, what happened, because they were just nailing those starts. They were finding gaps when there were no gaps, and then finally at the end a gap appeared. And they were also talking about an element, I think, that's very interesting. It could be that when you're so strong as a team as Australia, maybe other teams tend to be a bit more cautious with you, and they tend to stay a bit further away, right?
Yeah, but that's clear. I don't want to say that they had the red carpet, but that's kind of like, okay, the philosophy of the other teams. That's clear, yeah.
Yeah, they always end up finding a space in front of them and nailing the starts. They asked Slingsby how he managed, and he said, well, sometimes it just all clicks together. There's no real element that makes you understand. For sure, they work so much on those starts, but sometimes it just clicks, and they were just nailing all those starts, like always winning, always in the front boats, and that makes it all much easier.
Purple patch at the moment. We hope we can continue it on.
So at the end of day 1, the provisional standing was seeing Australia in front, of course, then Great Britain following, and surprise, France in 3rd place. That was a big positive surprise, Ricky?
Yeah, I put France as my surprise in our predictions back in New Zealand, when in the end they didn't race because of an issue with their wing. But finally they were able to get on the water, and they showed straight from the beginning that in these windy conditions where it's gusty and you have to control the height of the F50 very well. France is really good in these conditions. They love it. They love the high speed, high end of conditions. And they were flying, and that showed that at the end of the first day of racing, when they had never tried these new T-foils, the flight controller had on the Italian boat in New Zealand. But what they ended up being third at the end of day one. So big revelation from day one.
So, and now we head towards day two, the results of day two. I want to say that in day two, of course, the wind direction changed, so the course was a little bit modified. And what I also appreciated really much is the fact that Shark Island was really in the middle of the race course. So it was kind of an obstacle and something like an unknown variable, something that changes the wind, the strategies and so on. And I really loved to see some boats going left and some boats going right of the island.
Yeah, in our preview video, we had touched on it, right? We said it could be an element that would come into play, and that's exactly what happened. It was right in the middle of the racing course, and I think they like to put it there. It's such a unique element to Sydney. So, yeah, very cool to see. And it probably also played a role in the final.
We will get to that. So what we have to point out is that in day two, finally, New Zealand managed to find his power back. New Zealand ended up second in Fleet 5 behind Great Britain, who won, with Australia, of course, in third place. And then as well, New Zealand won Fleet 6. So yeah, Peter Burling was back.
Here, maybe New Zealand were in conditions they like a bit more. It was a lighter wind. You have to be maybe a bit more gentle, careful with your maneuvers, and find your wind gusts. So maybe lighter conditions do favor this New Zealand team. What we haven't talked about yet is GBR, right? They were having a blast of a weekend. They ended day one in second place, just behind Australia, and they won fleet race number 5, right? And they were always there. They were executing so well their performance, and they managed to secure a spot in this final that was critical, and in 3 events, 3 finals.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive how they always managed to be there. They won 2 races. In other 2 races ended up in the podium. And yeah, indeed, they managed to secure the final. That's the way you go, I would say. Also, it was interesting day 2 because the last 2-3 fleets, it's the moment where you start making the calculations where you should be to go into the final. And this time was a big fight between Denmark and Canada to access to the final, especially in the last fleet was very interesting. Which in the end ended up with Canada entering the final race, the final 3-boat race, and Denmark unfortunately didn't manage to go in the final just for 3 points. So even if you end up behind towards the end, it's always important to try to gain some positions. You know, you get this 1 point more that can.
Yes, it's always so critical, and we have to think that Canada at the end of day 1 only had 20 points. And they were in 7th position, right? Canada managed to put it together. They didn't do these amazing performances on the second day either, but they just consistently scoring points, and that's key. And they managed to make it through.
Yeah, I guess that it was kind of a bit of luck because the other teams were not managing to do enough, but also a bit of consistency, I think, and some calculations, I would say, in the end. They were not taking any risk, I think. So the final was Australia, of course, dominating the weekend, who was, I would say, the big favorite there. Great Britain and Canada, but what happened?
Final was a very interesting one. Australia, you have a penalty. And that gave the lead to GBR that came in super fast and was straight away ahead at Mark 1. And with a penalty for Australia, you thought, well, Australia has a long way to recover. And they never really did in the end. What happened next still?
Yeah, actually, I saw the final, and at some point I thought, okay, Canada, you have made it. It was so far ahead that I thought, yeah, that's impossible that they are going to lose. But in the in the penultimate leg, GBR really ignited the boosts. I don't know what they had. You can tell me something better. I don't know. They managed to recover all the space in between, and then they did the overtake.
Yeah, so we saw in Sydney the key was these upwind legs, right? And in a final, you have basically two of these legs upwind. And Canada first took the lead from GBR, choosing to stay on the right side, like going all the way up on the right, along more or less the boundary was the way to go. And that's where they got so much advantage. They had like 400 meters at one point of advantage. So, well, Canada's got this wrapped up, right? There was both Australia and GBR going to the left. That's where they lost all their time. But what do in the second time they come around for the upwind? They don't repeat what they just had to go so far ahead. No, they pick the left side, and this left GBR picking the right side for the second upwind. And I don't know why they didn't cover them really. So that was a big mistake, not covering your opponents as fast as possible. And and the GBR just went straight through them.
Another red carpet, but this time for GBR.
Yeah, or maybe an elevator, I would call that. Like that right side was really, you could see the angle of the boat. Like on the right side, they were really heading up those ladder lines a lot faster. So big mistake for Canada not covering them. And then they just had to get around Shark Island and all the way down and celebrate with some champagne, because GBR got their first win. So third final in a row, and finally they managed to lock in the win.
So the overall standing of SailGP at the moment sees Great Britain first, Australia second, and Spain third. So, as you said, 3 finals in a row, Ricky, for Great Britain. What's their secret?
Yeah, Dylan Fletcher has been doing really a great job with the team. Maybe it's all the experience he gained last summer in Barcelona for the America's Cup cycle. We must remember he was helming Ineos Britannia for the America's Cup with Ben Ainsley, and he took over the helm of the SailGP team from Ben Ainsley. So let's say he's been involved in foiling boats already. He's already raced in SailGP right at the beginning of the competition. And I think they're pulling all the strings together and they're really performing at their best. Maybe also the team has financial stability. They seem to be really in a good place because they have these sponsors on the boat. That's always nice to see, with Emirates, of course. So they look very strong now. I think of pure pace, maybe I would be more worried of Slingsby because he's such a killer. We've seen him win so many fleet races. But overall now, who's in front is Dylan Fletcher, that gets into the final every time and now has managed to score a win, and a big one, because in Australia, in Sydney, I'm sure Slingsby would have been happy to win at home with the Australian team. But no, the British stole the win in Sydney.
So half of you is happy because you're half English,
of course, yeah.
And the other half a little bit less happy because we have to say something about the team of our nation, Italy.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a not so good weekend, I would say, for Italy. Starting from the very first race where they took a penalty at the start. They were pretty much ahead of everybody, but they took a penalty against Brazil. And Brazil was last, so they had to wait all the way. But then afterwards, they didn't manage to do much.
Yeah, that's so terrible when you get a penalty and the team you have to go behind is all the way back. So it's really painful. I wonder if they're considering different types of penalties, because sometimes you can really solve your penalty very fast, and sometimes it takes you like 1 or 2 minutes to get behind that boat that's fallen off the foils. It takes ages. So and Italy couldn't keep it clean this weekend. They were really the nosedive team, probably, along with Germany, I guess, for all the penalty points they got, and the USA, of course, that didn't even compete. So yes, staying out of trouble is really key, and Italy is too often with a penalty sign on, when there's the flag at the top of the boat.
Yeah,
there's always a small P
penalty for Italy.
Yeah, they maybe go out of boundaries. So hopefully they get to clean up. Tita's got some work to do there. But the new team to SailGP, so let's gonna be expected, but we want more for them, of course.
GVR leaves the Down Under as top of the board. Will they be able to conquer the 4th final in a row?
Will USA's luck turn in the USA?
And who won our Fantafoil? Find it out in our next episode.
All right.
All right.